Welcome to the 2023 Coaching Summit. This Coaching Summit is brought to you by us, Zoe Hawkins and Joe Wheatley from Inga Company, a global coaching training organisation. It is our mission to make coaching as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, and this Coaching Summit is one of the ways in which we do that. If you'd like to connect with us outside of this summit, then please follow us on Instagram, connect with us on LinkedIn, or join our Facebook group, The Coaching Crowd. We encourage you to share your learnings from these sessions and tag us in our social channels so we can share in the learning with you. But for now, sit back and enjoy the session. We can't wait to hear what you think.
Hi everybody, welcome to the final session of day one of the Coaching Summit. It is my honour to be able to introduce you to Gwen Jones. Now, Gwen is a multi-passionate therapist and coach who has been serving the neurodivergent population for over 25 years. She's a mother of 4 neurodiverse children, wife of an ND man, former SENCO with a BA in psychology, MSc in Occupational Psychology, and is a qualified sex and relationship therapist. So in this session, Gwen's going to be sharing with you what coaches need to know to understand about neurodiversity, so you can offer inclusive spaces and services that work for the not so typical clients as well. Stay till the end of the session because Gwen is offering a prize draw for her favourite ND tool, and she will be asking you to email to enter into that draw. Now, this is something that comes up in coaching with my clients. I think it's really important for us all to learn more about, for those of us that are coaches and actually all of us, and the way that we help to create more inclusive spaces. So I'm going to be enjoying this session with you all. Over to you, Gwen.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for making this a priority for yourselves today and for your clients. You know, the thing about this is there's 2 reasons that I love that this is here. First of all, is more and more people are starting to really understand what their life experience could have been like and how it could have been supported if they had had a greater awareness of who they are. But second of all, I'm grateful because there's a lot of people out there talking about neurodiversity who are actually neurotypical, but I'm here as a representative of someone who is actually neurodiverse. So I have the lived experience in addition to the professional experience. And I think it's really important that we have representation out there. So I was very, very grateful that the amazing In Good Company was willing to let me be here to share my knowledge with you and to you know, have a great conversation. Now, I will say you might look at this and be like, somebody put this together. I swear they have ADHD, but guess what? They do. It's me. I have ADHD. And so you'll notice that rather than it being a linear process, we have themes that kind of go back and forth and tie into each other, because I think in a web as opposed to a line. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be working with somebody with my particular brand of neurodiversity. I will say as well, I'm here for questions. I don't have a script. I don't believe in that for me. It just doesn't work that way. I don't sound really robotic, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat and they'll get asked either in the middle or at the end, because I want to make sure that this is applicable for you. But most importantly, what I really want is to kind of take the mystery and the scariness away from neurodiversity. Some people refer clients to me. They're like, oh, this person wants to talk to me about their self-esteem, but they're autistic, so I can't work with them. And I'm like, no, you can. Like, maybe don't work it, you know, specifically in understanding neurodivergence itself, but neurodivergent people still need your skill set, still need your tools. Just a little bit of tweaking in delivery and the way things work out, and understanding the position of someone who is just so not typical and how we move forward. So here's a little bit about me. I started my career with a bachelor's degree in psychology and then taught for 9 years in the States and in the United Kingdom, and then realized that I didn't really care about reading and math, which wasn't great for being a teacher. But my students were the ones who basically, the ones that all the teachers kicked out of their classrooms because they didn't like their behavior, they got sent to me. Those were my little guys. And I realized what I was most fascinated by was relationships. So how do we relate to ourselves? How do we relate to our parents, to our children, to our partners, to the greater societies in our workplace? And so I realized relationship was what I really wanted to do. So I retrained, as we do, as a relationship therapist, and sex and relationship therapy have a tendency to go together for very obvious reasons. And then I'm a parenting coach, psychotherapist, and then through that discovered this amazing world of workplace well-being, inclusion groups, things like that. And I was like, oh, I love serving here too. And as someone with ADHD, I need to spin several plates or I'm uncomfortable. In addition to private practice, I also work with master's degree in occupational psychology in many different corporate settings, delivering trainings like this one, doing one-to-one coaching, group coaching. I even designed one company's well-being program because I just love to see the way we all show up and how we can better relate to each other. But again, mostly the reason that I'm here is as the mother of 4 neurodivergent children, the wife of a neurodivergent husband, and a neurodivergent person myself, I understand the importance of active allyship in this space and in others. So that's how I show up here, and that's how I appreciate where you're coming from to find out more. Now, everybody asks me, Gwen, when were you diagnosed? Because there's this huge trend right now about, I say trend, there's this huge renaissance and awakening of people starting to understand, especially women, that the tools that were designed to find their neurodivergence didn't work for them 25 years ago. Now, for me, that wasn't necessarily true because I am a very hyperactive person. It was very obvious that I was ADHD, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was 21. And I happened to be working in a psychology department under a professor who happened to be one of the pioneers in understanding neurodivergence in women. And I went into work one day and I was being particularly Gwen that day. And she's like, oh, Gwen, have you not had your meds today? And I started laughing. She's like, no, really, have you not had your meds today? What's happening for you? Why you're kind of all over the place? And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, Gwen, honey, you've been doing this for like 6 months and you don't see you here. And so I was very lucky as a woman to be diagnosed 23 years ago, and to be able to understand what that meant for me. Now, there wasn't a lot of information out there, so there was a lot of trial and error, but now we're getting more and more research to back up that actually the lived experience of women with ADHD, of men with ADHD, of non-binary people with ADHD, they're all very, very different, but we still kind of fit under that same umbrella. So as far as what we're going to cover today, first of all, it's important that we talk about keeping the secret for anyone who was diagnosed within like more than a year ago. And I'll talk about what that means in a minute. I'm going to talk about the most common types of neurodiversity diagnoses that will show up for you and what does it look like for them. And I really want to talk about executive functioning because no matter where you are and what your label is, if you are neurodiverse, executive functioning is going to come into it. And as we talk about diagnoses, I do want to talk about the whole person. I do not suffer with ADHD. I suffer with lack of accommodation in a world that was not designed for me. I sometimes suffer with a lack of understanding, and I definitely have suffered from discrimination. But my ADHD is just how my brain works, and I wouldn't change that for anything. Then as coaches and as leaders, there are some rules that you need to break for your neurodivergent clients. And we'll talk about how to do that and what it looks like and how to do it ethically. Because remember that our number one goal is not to push our agenda or our training or our tool or whatever it is that we're using. It's to make sure that our clients are getting what they need from us. We'll talk a lot about language and neurodiversity. How does that show up? And then I'm going to show you some different ways that you can diversify tools that you already have in your toolbox, just so that they can be a little bit more accessible. And through this whole thing, allyship is such a passion of mine. I hope that you understand that allyship and being an ally needs to be more than just an adjective. It needs to be a verb. So we're going to talk about how do I actively show up as an ally in the neurodivergent community. So I'm always trying to be normal. I'm always trying to pass, and it's exhausting. I can tell you right now that when I received my diagnosis back in the year 2000, when I was talking to my psychiatrist about it, he was like, now listen, there's some things that you need to know about this. Never tell anybody that you have ADHD in your workplace. And in fact, don't tell anyone who doesn't really need to know, because you will never be promoted. You certainly won't be hired if you tell people starting out, and there's some weird biases out there and nobody really understands what it means. So this has to be your secret that you keep. And the more normal that, again, the word he used was normal, the more normal that you can look, the more able you will be to show up and progress in your career. Because I was a senior at university, so I was starting to graduate, and he was giving me this great advice for setting out in the big wide world. And here's the thing, y'all, is back in 2000, that was good advice. It was true. If I had shown up and said, oh, by the way, I'm ADHD, can I please teach your children? People would have said, no, thanks. We have these other candidates here, despite the fact that I have a deeper understanding of what their life experience is than most people who walk through the door. If I had told certain family members of mine, they would have said I was making it up. They would have said, oh, but that's for naughty little boys, and don't you outgrow that? They would have said 100,000 different things, not trying to be unkind, but showing up that way anyway. And it would have been a lot of hurdles for me to have to go through. And in fact, I didn't really believe him at first until I got my diagnosis. And within about 2 weeks, I met a new guy and we started dating. And we were out to lunch one day, and I said, oh, hold on a second, I just need to take my medicine. And he said, what are you taking medicine for? I was like, oh, I just got a diagnosis of ADHD. And he goes, oh, you didn't tell me you had mental problems. I'm not here for that. And he got up and left because I have mental problems. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really true. Now, again, I got a little hurt, but probably not the person for me. But that would have been my experience moving through my career at that point in time. Now, luckily, times have changed, and we are starting to have a better understanding. And so what you'll get instead in ableism are things like, oh, everybody's ADHD, or, oh, it's kind of like this trying to normalize it through diminishing experiences. So the secret isn't as necessary as it used to be, but there is still that feeling of, I'm uncomfortable sharing this with people. In fact, I have people knowing that I'm a neurodivergent expert who come into my clinic room, and they won't tell me for about 3 or 4 sessions because they're trying to suss it out and see how safe am I here. So be aware that masking, or the attempt to look neurotypical, has been a part of a neurodivergence life experience. And what we don't want to do is to create an environment in our coaching or therapy practices where they have to mask some more. So we want to make sure that they can be 100% their authentic selves here. So when I talk about executive functioning, I want you to think about it on a spectrum, each of these different categories. And actually, neurotypical is in the middle of this spectrum. So you have hyperfunctioning and hypofunctioning. So I'm doing really well, and this is my superpower, and I don't know why this is even a problem for people way up here. Or, man, there's no way I can handle this. This is not my wheelhouse. This is a skill set that I could not pick up on my own. I had to learn this skill. All of these different categories are skill sets that neurotypical people learn in their world for how to show up. This is how you do life. This is how you adult. These are the things that you need. And they pick it up by watching each other and kind of this tribal mentality of picking things up. But neurodivergent people don't have that natural ability to pick up all of these. In fact, the way our brains work, it's really, really difficult. So, for example, the first one is impulse control, that thinking before you act. I don't think I learned how to do that until I was probably about 16. It caused me to stick my foot in my mouth. Sometimes I would accidentally hurt somebody, not because I was being mean, but because I thought I was being playful. And I'm also kind of quick-witted. When you grow up as the weirdo kid, you learn to be really clever with your banter. And I wouldn't think about, oh, this banter is crossing the line. So I would hurt people's feelings as well. I would put myself in areas of danger because it just seemed really fun to do. As an adult, the way it shows up are things like really having to control my spending. So I see something and I want it and I obsess over it. I want to buy it right now. And I have to put steps in place for myself to control that impulse, or else my family would never have any money. But things like that on a regular basis, even things like being able to watch what I eat, being able to not go down a Reddit hole at 12:30 at night, knowing I have to be awake for a client at 8 in the morning, controlling that impulse and thinking, is this a consequence that I want that is tagged onto the choice that I'm making? Now, my son, who is autistic, who I'll talk about quite a bit, by the way, because he's given me consent and permission, impulse control, man, that is his superpower. We used to call him health and safety as a child because he would go to the pool and walk around and find all the dangers before he would be willing to step in. So he's got it in the hyper functioning. I've got it in the hypo. Emotional control is another one. So I would get hurt over everything and feel it so overtly and so on the cuff of my sleeve. I would cry and I would not control either my outward or my inward expression of feelings. My son outwardly expressed, we bought him a car and he went, "Oh, neat, thanks, Mom." And other people are like, "Wow, big thing." I'm like, no. But in his version, that's the equivalent of me going, "Oh, so amazing," because he does not have an outward control or an outward expression of emotions that's as just demonstrative as me. Flexible thinking is my superpower. I can adjust in a heartbeat. I can write a presentation and then change it 5 minutes before if I need to. I'm completely comfortable with any client coming in and needing to change the plan because something's come up, and that can be really beneficial in my career. Not as great when you need to be the one who drives the agenda, when you need to be the one who's sticking to the process and really saying, no, we have a way of doing this and you have to do it this way. It doesn't matter that you can think of 9 different ways. Working memory is an interesting one. So the way I describe this to people is, think about when you learned your times tables when you were a little kid, right? And so you got your 6s, you've learned your 6 times tables, you got them, you sang them with your parents, you got them down, and then you have to go say them in front of the class. And some anxiety sets in, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I know my 6s, but I can't remember 6 times 7. And you start to have this panic attack. That's because the stress and the anxiety that you're feeling is taking up all the space in your brain and it's pushing out working memory. It doesn't mean you don't know what 6 times 7 is. It means that you're having to work really hard to find that particular folder in your filing cabinet. So when you are neurodivergent and the world is kind of 20 degrees on its side all the time anyway, so you're having to be a little bit hypervigilant to try and pass and fit in and make sure you're on time and doing what you're supposed to be doing, working memory can often be taxed. And this is why so many neurodivergent children get extra time on their exams. It's not that they can't do the work. It's that the stress of the testing situation that they're in means they need that extra time to freak out a little bit before they ease into the test. Self-awareness and self-monitoring, again, not a great one for me. I can tell you stories about teachers having to adjust my buttons on my clothes, about, not being aware about things like body odor when I was 13, 14 years old, because I just had to be told. I just did not have that awareness and that monitoring that it was, that it would impact other people. As an adult, my self-monitoring is when I get really excited talking about something. Sometimes I don't notice when people's eyes glaze over, or I notice and I just don't care because it feels so great talking about it. So, whereas other people who are neurodivergent, often as a trauma response, will be hyper monitoring themselves, afraid to speak, afraid to say the wrong thing, to take the wrong step because they felt wrong in societal situations. Planning and prioritizing, I always say this should be 2, because I can make plans on plans on plans, y'all. If you have a business idea, come talk to me about it, because I can help you spin out like 15 different outcomes for it. Now, only 3 or 4 of them will be kind of realistic, but it's fun for me to do. Now, ask me to sit down and put that plan into action and prioritize. And I'm like, oh, this is so boring. Can't I just be a big sky thinker? So I come up with the plan. People like my son put the plan into action and keep people like me on track. And then task initiation is a huge one. And it's one I wish we talked about more. So I don't know if you've heard that phrase, like, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat it one bite at a time. But for me, as a neurodivergent person, I'm like, okay, but do I start with the trunk or the tail? And is it really ethical to eat an elephant? Or maybe if it's a chocolate elephant, it wouldn't be so bad, blah, 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 blah. And I spin out all these things. And taking that first step is so anxiety producing. People often confuse this with motivation. And it's not. It's not that I don't want to do the thing. It's that I'm doing 9 different steps of it at once. And then there's organization. I believe in organized chaos. Unfortunately, the world does not. So organization is a tool that I have had to teach myself, especially having children. Whereas for other people like my son, he organized his Lego by color and size when he was 3 years old, because organization is his happy place. So you can see how there are people in the middle and there are people on either end of these. And this is where they often need help and support. So the number one most common diagnosis that you'll see is dyslexia. It says 1 in 10 worldwide. In the UK, they think it's actually 1 in 12. people recognize it as a difficulty in reading, writing, and spelling, right? So they think it's a learning disability. But the truth is, it is a neurological condition, and there's a lot more that goes along with it. They really struggle with working memory, as do most people who are neurodivergent. And understanding written instructions can be difficult. So if you have a client who has the boss who loves to send the novel in an email, they may as well not send that, y'all. There's no way. There's no way that, and it's not even just decoding the words, it's being able to decode the words and understand and comprehend what is being asked. Organization and sequencing is difficult. So as children, it would be things like first, middle, and last. As an adult, it's things like being able to break down my project into tasks and knowing where to start and what order to go in. And time management can also be a difficult piece, knowing that this piece number 1 is going to take 5 minutes, but piece number 2 is going to take 20. It's very difficult to have that association with time. Their strengths, however, is they're incredibly creative because they've learned to be creative as a coping mechanism as children. If I can't read, I still need to let you know that I'm smart. So I'm going to do it by making dioramas, by being the person who speaks in a group. I'm going to find other ways to make sure that I'm seen for the knowledge that I have. They have incredible spatial awareness. So you'll see a lot of dyslexic people go into graphic design, for example, because they can really see 3D and understand how to move things around and see all the moving parts, which is also great if you're trying to see for project managers, who needs to come in and put all these parts in place. They're typically very good communication people. They're the person that you want to be able to speak for the group. They'll put their hand up to do it. They'll want to, they're very eloquent because they've learned to use their language skills verbally to make up for what they couldn't do reading and writing. And they're fantastic big picture thinkers. They're great at being able to see, you can plan a barbecue, but don't forget to buy the cutlery, kind of a thing. Then you have dyspraxia. So this is another 10% of the population. Half of them are also dyslexic. This is what we call co-occurring conditions. In fact, oftentimes in neurodiversity, you'll have co-occurring conditions where many show up together. It shows up, generally speaking, as poor hand-eye coordination as children, and also fine and gross motor skills. So I'm mildly dyspraxic, so I'm a little bit clumsy. And they have spatial awareness challenges. You might see a lot of people who have a squint when they were younger. I have a squint myself. So having that spatial awareness is difficult. Organization of steps that require movement is difficult because I have to think so much harder. So you can't just tell me go shoot the basketball and I go do it, because I have to think, okay, they're going to pass me the basketball. I have to take 4 steps and then I need to turn. That's probably the best place to turn so I don't trip. And then I need to look, okay, that's where the basketball, and okay, did I get it? And I'll still miss. But, I have to think all those steps through much slower than somebody who would do it by instinct. Short-term memory is often taxed if they are required to write or type at the same time. However, if they're able to verbalize and they're able to kind of sit back and close their eyes and visualize, the verbal memory tax lessens. And you'll often also find people who are diagnosed as verbally dyspraxic. I actually had a client like this, and it was amazing. We did therapy over email and over text because his verbal dyspraxia meant he couldn't form the words in his mouth very well. So if you were to listen to him, you would assume he had a very small vocabulary. But when he would write, and he would write to me what was going on or answer questions in text, the eloquence was beautiful. So kind of be aware of the stutterer, the person who's trying to pick smaller words because they can't quite form the words in their mouth. Dyspraxic people are incredible leaders. All of those soft skills that we need, the active listening, the paying attention to the detail, the nodding and making and checking in, the reassurance, that's a coping mechanism when you're having to make sure you get all the instructions right before you move. And so they have those as just an innate skill. Lots of empathy with these people because they have to have an awareness of what's going on in the world around them at a more conscious level, because they can't rely on their subconscious necessarily to let them know what's going on all in kind of the periphery. And it helps build this amazing sense of empathy. So active listening, strategy, problem solving. I mean, if I have to problem solve to be able to walk from one class to the other as a child, imagine my problem solving skills when I'm going into a big group. It's a muscle that I have had to work a lot harder than most people, which benefits me when I move into the corporate space or into the working space. Then we have my people, ADHD. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're 2.5 to 3% of the population. Time management is one of those things that people with ADHD often get labeled with. Now, I will say that there's a double-edged sword here. So you have the time blind, the people who cannot feel time. So 5 minutes, 5 hours feels the same. I'm the opposite, where I feel the visceral passing of time. I can tell you without looking at a clock that right now we're about 23 to 25 minutes into my presentation, and I can feel it in my body. It's also a very poorly named condition. I do not have a deficit of attention. I have an overabundance of attention. I'm hearing 9 different people talk to me at the same time, and I'm actually comfortably aware of all 9 of those conversations. Where I have difficulty is knowing where to concentrate. So am I supposed to listen to this person? But this person's a little bit more interesting and I'd rather be over here, but okay, I guess you can force me to listen to this person, kind of a thing. Staying on topic is one of those things we also get labeled with. And part of that is, as I said before, we are web thinkers. So in our minds, we are on topic when we tell you 4 different tangents that will all lead back to the original point. But by the time we get back to the point, you've forgotten what you asked to begin with. People say we are not rational. And in a way, that's true, but that is also a double-edged sword because it can also be our superpower, because we do not necessarily see limitations when it comes to thinking through problem solving. And we are incredible procrastinators. Something you need to know about procrastination, especially in the neurodivergent, it is not the same thing as lazy. It is an anxiety state, often linked to task initiation. It's the idea that this project is so big, I can't even start, so I'm going to put it off until the anxiety of, girl, you better get this done, you've only got 1 day left, is bigger than the anxiety of getting it started. And then I'll power through and I'll knock it out and you'll think I've spent a month on it. So our strengths, one of the things that ADHD people do, and autistic people as well, but not quite as much as ADHD, is the ability to hyperfocus. If I am interested in something to my own detriment, I will hyperfocus. And I mean, the world disappears. I am so into the thing, and the level of detail that I'll remember is really, really strong. So I can actually do what one person would do in a week in about 1.5 days to 2 days, because if I'm hyper-focused and I'm in the zone, then that's it. And I just plump, power through. We're incredibly creative people because we don't see limitations. So I don't see why we can't talk about how to make cars fly just because we don't have the technology. Well, where do you think we get it from? Through conversations. Let's talk about it. See how it would work. Generally speaking, people with ADHD are very enthusiastic and charismatic for 2 reasons. One is we have so much energy in our bodies. Either busy brains or busy bodies or both, and we need to get it out. So being charismatic is a way to kind of get that energy out, right? But also because we're often very naughty as school children. And if we don't want to be labeled as the naughty kid, we'll be charismatic, we'll be funny, we'll be enthusiastic, but to the point that we can bring you into our energy space so that it's very, very infectious as a way of making and keeping friends. Many people with ADHD are incredible innovators. Again, not necessarily the ones who finish and do the fine detail of the project, but to find the new road to power through. And we're incredibly change sensitive. Think about like a herd of gazelles, right? They don't start running when they see the lion. They start running when one of them goes, wait, something's wrong. And there's like an intuitive and instinctual sensitivity to the change. And they all start running and they don't need to know why. They just know, Gwen's running, we should run, there's going to be danger. And then suddenly a lion appears. So that change sensitivity can be really beneficial, especially in sales work when you're trying to see those minute changes in someone's face to see, is this going here? Is this going there? Are they liking what I'm saying? Are they not? Then we have autistic people. At the moment, 1 in 59 children are currently being diagnosed. They don't have good statistics on adults right now because autistic adults have a tendency to not want to report because of the Rain Man effect. The idea of like, no, I'm autistic. That doesn't mean that you want to take me to Las Vegas. I don't count cards. I like the fact that I know all the tube stops is not a monetizing characteristic of my specialized interest. They're generally very sensory sensitive. So pick a sense, whether it's touch, taste, smell, hearing, they get overstimulated and become oversensitized. So for example, my son wears his socks inside out because the seam of the socks feels like razor blades on his skin. They struggle with emotional interpretation both ways. So it's called the autistic paradox, where you don't look at me and see what I'm feeling and understand by the way I demonstrate, and I can't actually see it in you either. And we've got to learn to speak each other's languages. Information processing is one of those things where you'll see an autistic person get a bunch of information and they'll just kind of freeze, and then they'll go, okay, and they'll move forward because they have to see it all kind of go into place. They also struggle with changes in the status quo. So something as simple as moving my desk is really uncomfortable for me. I mean, a discomfort to the point of being visceral. And they are not multitaskers. They do the thing and then they move on to the next thing. But they have incredible attention to detail. That's why we have so many autistic people in tech. We need them there. We need people who can see the code. They're process driven. They're great at coming up with processes and then following the processes without question. They're incredibly logical thinkers. So if you're being overly emotive about a topic, go talk to your autistic friend. They'll help you park that to think through the logic side so you can make a balanced decision. And their ability to retain information on their specialized interest, immense. Y'all, with 2 autistic sons, I cannot tell you what I know about Pokemon right now, because it's not just knowing all the Pokemon, it's knowing which studios they went into and what powers they have and how they evolve. And that type of thing goes into their work, because they will not work someplace that they're bored. They just won't do it. But if they find a place that they are interested, then they will know everything about it by the time they're done. And they are highly, highly efficient people. They have a need for efficiency to the point that wasting time is probably the #1 autistic sin. Do not waste my time. And I will even spend an hour wasting time talking about how much I can't waste my time, because I have that need for efficiency. Now, things that all neurodivergent people may or may not experience are things like rejection sensitivity. So that means like somebody's, I go say hey to somebody and they don't say hey back. Right now, I know in my brain, of course, they could have not seen me, or they could have thought that they said it or they didn't, but I'll go home and I will chew on that for weeks, wondering what I have done wrong, what's wrong with me. They're very, very sensitive to rejection. So when it comes time to things like progress reviews, we have to be sensitive here. We have to train our leaders to understand that any sort of rejection needs to be given as feedback and needs to be received as feedback. Compartmentalization is a great skill of many neurodivergent people. So, for example, autistic people can cope with death often very easily because they compartmentalize it and they have things in their boxes, but they don't like their boxes to mix. So we have to sometimes help them see actually a little bit of this box can go into that box, or pull those boxes apart. Educational trauma is something I promise you that they've been through. The idea of what is wrong with me? Why is it so much easier for Jocelyn to have a clean desk, but my desk looks like I've been robbed, like there's so much stuff billowing out of it? So people saying unkind, negative things in, trying to encourage me to do better. My little brother's autistic and dyspraxic, and we were growing up in Mississippi, and he had really messy handwriting. And so what they figured is, I know how to fix this. If I can't read your handwriting, I'm going to take you in the hall and I'm going to hit you with a wooden paddle. And then you'll learn to take your time. Happened, y'all, swear. My own brother happened, because that's how you fix writing problems. Now, of course, that's more of a severe one, but the teachers telling you to try harder and work harder makes you feel like a failure. We have huge gaps in our knowledge, and we don't know that they're there. So sometimes you have to tell me, Gwen, you're talking too much in a meeting. I need you to pull it back a bit. Or sometimes you need to tell me that I'm being rude, because I don't have, it's just this gap that's just, I don't see it. Something that's coming up for a lot of especially Gen Z adults as they're moving into the working world is their neurodivergence was a part of their parents' identity. And now all their business is out there in the world, and they're really embarrassed about every single meltdown that they've had in their mom's blog. They're process detectives. They're trying to figure out what is the process here and what is the process there, which when you're in the coaching space means when you put a new tool out there, they might spend time going, she's trying to make me do this, because they're more worried about the process than relaxing into it and seeing how the process will help them. And many times they will be the good student. It will take them time to relax, to be a little bit messy in the room, because they want to do therapy right. They want to do coaching right. Am I doing this right? Am I asking the right things? Is it okay for me to do this? Checking in all the time. So beware of the good student. When it comes to breaking the rules, it is so important. I don't know if you've noticed, but I like to talk a little bit. So I am a verbal processor. And if you ask me to sit down and talk for 45 minutes and not interrupt me, I will do it and I will get nothing from it. This is where contracting comes into place. So asking your neurodivergent clients, are you a verbal processor? And if so, how would you like me to interrupt when I feel like you've gotten off track? Or how would you like me to check in with you? How much do you need to process out loud and how much do you need me to pull you back? Be aware of that, because it's okay to interrupt your clients as long as you have consent and permission. Interrupting is really, really important too, because I'm going to probably throw 10 different things at you and 2 of them will be relevant. And I need you to help me refocus and come back to those 2 things, or refocus on, okay, Gwen, I know that's a really interesting story, but I don't need all the back detail. We've contracted to focus on this. How are we going to do that? How are we going to communicate with each other? Do you want small talk in the beginning? I have an autistic client who says, please don't make me do small talk. Can I just come in and say, okay, here's what I want to work on, and start with contract? I'm like, absolutely. Because that's what they need. Just like my verbally dyspraxic client said, can we please do this over email and text? Because I'm just not into the talking kind of thing. I'm like, sure, let's do it. Visualizations is another one. This idea that, go off into your mind and do this visualization. How are you going to make sure that I'm not going off into my mind and spinning out? How are you going to keep me on track? Can you shorten it? If you are curious about whether or not someone is neurodivergent, do I get to ask that as a clinician? That's something that I would say take to supervision. If it's not something that you're well aware of course you wouldn't want to say, but there have been times where I've said, oh, that sounds very familiar to me. In fact, we might use the my friend Joe technique of, oh, I had a client who was just like that and they were ADHD and that's how their neurodivergence showed up. Timekeeping is another one. If I don't viscerally feel time, can you help keep me on track? And can you send me a few extra reminders about when my appointment is? Because I don't want to forget it, but I might, because I might need that 10-minute buzz on my phone to remind me to go where I'm going. And can you keep your copy short and sweet? We love the stories, but can you keep your copies so that I can consume it as a dyslexic person? Or can you put a video of yourself reading your copy to me, or an audio? Make it accessible for me, because when you send me homework and it's 3 pages long and I'm dyslexic, I really struggle there. Language matters. Ableism is the way that we discriminate against people who are neurodivergent. Basically, what we're saying is, if we can make you more normal, you would be more successful, as opposed to let's make the world more accessible for you. So this comes in conversion. So you've heard about conversion therapy for people who are queer, for example. Conversion therapy for people who are ADHD is, let me teach you how to sit still. Common phrases that get thrown out there like, oh, you don't seem that autistic. Or pandering, it's so amazing that you're able to do your job and be dyslexic. Wow. Person first language is this thing that came out probably from a bunch of neurotypical people who are trying to be kind. The idea of I see you as a person first and then I see your diagnosis. It is not the way that we do things. We do not do person first language. We don't say a person with dyslexia, because I can't put my dyslexia down and walk away from it. So just like I am a brunette woman, just like I am an American woman, just like I am also a British woman, I am an ADHD woman. And we start with the characteristic and then go to the person. But there is a matter of personal preference, and we work with what our clients bring to us. We don't want to force people to disclose. We don't want to be overt or covert. The big one I want to say on here is we do not want to assume support. We want people to be able to resource themselves up and see where they need their support. And then also, I do not have symptoms. I do not pathologize my ADHD unless I am looking to diagnose as a clinician. Instead, we talk about traits. What are the traits of your autism, of your ADHD? Things that we need as adults. So whether you are working with a client who's supervising somebody who's neurodivergent or somebody who is neurodivergent, I need predictability and structure. I need to be the last one whose appointment you change because you had an unexpected doctor's appointment. You need to be careful, because I will lull you into debate traps, because I have had to explain myself over and over and over again. And I may not have the best boundary rules. I've had to talk to clients about picking their nose in front of me or farting in the room. It's uncomfortable, but it's also something that they need to be aware of, because those boundaries then lead off into their workplace. Tone policing is one to be very careful of, especially with your autistic clients, who can have either be very loud or have something that doesn't quite, their tone doesn't necessarily match what they're saying. So we don't want to police what they're saying with us, unless we are teaching them how other people might see, or working with them on how other people might see what they're presenting. And understand that uncertainty in the neurodivergent person is visceral. We feel it in our bodies. Honestly, it feels like pain. It feels like sickness. So if I'm uncertain, I really need you to make sure I understand by getting specific. Tell me exactly what you want, to the point that you might think you're being rude. Please be blunt. It helps. And the most thing that I'll need is time and understanding. So when I'm diversifying my tools, pick literally any tool that you like to use, one of your go-tos. Think about the wording on it. Is it in a font that I can access? Do you have a video that you can send me to explain it to me? Is it something that is made for my benefit, or is it something that is made for the benefit of those around me? And can you help me understand that? Another important thing is the difference between still and calm. Doing visualizations with my autistic clients, I say in the beginning, if you need to stim through this, where they kind of rock back and forth and they move their bodies and things like that, that's fine. You are calm when you stim. Stimming is not, it looks very anxiety producing to the untrained eye, but stimming is a happy place. So if you want to stim through your hypnosis, you stim away, because stillness and keeping your body still hurts, but being calm is just being relaxed. You might have a client with aphantasia who cannot visualize things in their mind. They just can't do it. So finding ways to work around it that do not require them to visualize is so important. Cutting out the words both on the page and the words that I use, cutting it down, making it succinct, and also helping them do the same. And the other one I want to bring up, because we all ask our clients to do it, is journaling. You can journal in 100 different ways. You can draw pictures, you can do word clouds, it can be online, it can be on the page, you can have a structured journal or a non-structured journal. The most important thing is the process of journaling. So how can we make journaling accessible to you? But most importantly, whatever tool that you use, make sure you are not accidentally doing conversion therapy. I don't want a tool that's going to teach me how to hold still and not stim, because that's not for my benefit. I don't want a tool that is only there to make other people around me feel more comfortable, to my detriment. I want to make sure that this tool is in place to help me. Now, people ask me all the time, what's it like to be neurodiverse? I'm like, I don't know, because it's my whole life. But my son, Drake, put it really, really well. And he said, if you look at me, here I am, this half American, half British white kid, man in 21st century world, right? But what would happen if you took me and you put me in the middle of rural Japan? Now, in the beginning, I would look so weird, and I would be, losing it a little bit and crying, and I'd be so uncomfortable, and I wouldn't know what's going on, and people wouldn't understand what was going on with me. But after a while, I can learn to eat the food, I can learn the language, I can learn the customs and how to behave, but I'm always going to look different, and I'm always going to have an accent. And as long as people can accept me in that space, that's all I need. That's what our goal is working with neurodiversity. It's not about making you look like you belong. It's about making sure that the environment that you're in is one that you can participate in. So I have on here my email and also my LinkedIn. So if you want to be part of my amazing prize draw for my favorite tool for my neurodivergent clients, which is this amazing workplace whiteboard. I have a whole video tutorial that goes with how we like to use this. Please send me an email or send me a message on LinkedIn, and I will put you in the prize draw. I'll give you till Wednesday evening to be able to do that, in case there's people watching this on catch up. But thank you very much for your time. And I'd like to see, are there any questions?
Yeah, Gwen, are you happy for me to read them out to you? Shall I go for it? So first one is, as coaches, if we want to specialise in ND coaching, do we need specific qualifications, in your opinion?
No, I don't think that you do. I think that if you have no awareness of neurodivergence and that's what you want to do, then yes, absolutely. But the qualifications that are out there are very, very new. So as far as like going through and getting another 3-year degree or 2-year degree, absolutely not. You don't need that. You do need some specialized understanding, and you do need to make sure you're doing some coach training, which probably ethically speaking, you wouldn't want to charge your full price for as you're kind of learning to work with those different presentations. But it's more about the lived experience of other people. So I would push you more towards your own self-study. So I specialize in ADHD and autism, for example, and I just absorb all the content I can on that. And it's not all by experts, it's also by lived experience.
Great. When coaching on tone, what do you feel is the most effective way to deliver the support?
So it's about, what does the client want to know? Is the client coming to you because they don't understand why somebody got so upset by what they said? Then it's about explaining. When you're coaching on tone, you are acting as a translator from the neurotypical world to the neurodivergent world. So just it's done in a way where it's like, I get that's not what you meant, and it's really good that that's not what you meant, and here's how it's received. So if you want, I'm not going to try and make you do one thing or another, but if you want to be able to kind of understand and communicate better, this is how it's received when you do this. So think about it as the interpreter or the translator.
Lovely, thank you. If we are coaches that are ND, is it okay for us to stim in a session? Should we disclose our own ND to clients?
So that's disclosure is a totally personal thing, and I will not say yes or no on that because it's up to you. I let clients know that I'm neurodivergent. I mean, it's what I do, so it's all over everything. They'd find it out anyway. And I usually have bracelets that I wear that I stim with that are quiet. And that includes when I'm working with trauma clients in my therapy practice. I let them know I fidget, but I'm here for them and I'm paying attention. And that it's not a reflection of them as so much as a reflection of helping me getting in tune with them. But again, it's very personal to you. Can you stim in a way without being aware of your stimming so that you can be more in tune with your client? Does it benefit them for you to stim? Then absolutely stim away. Just find the ways that stim that work for you and your client.
Great. I'll just do a final one now. What advice would you give coaches of staying in support and not conversion?
Oh, so is this for the benefit of my client? So I think the most powerful words in the English language as a coach are, how can I support you? So how can I support you? How can I help you? And even if that means helping you accept yourself as who you are and helping accept, act as an ally for yourself in this space, that you can say, actually, as someone with autism, I'm going to stim. I won't tap the table like this, but I might be moving my fingers like this instead. Help them accept themselves and who they are, and also help them so that they are getting the goal that they want without having to change the intuitive nature of who they are.
Fantastic. Gwen, I just want to say there have been so many amazing comments in the chat, so obviously we will share that with you anyway, so you can have a look through. But I just want to finish on a comment from David, and he's just put, "This has been so helpful, Gwen. Thank you for being willing to share yourself and your lived experience so openly, generously and authentically, and with so much useful, practical and relevant information. What a great way to end the day," which I think it really is. It's been fantastic. Thank you. This session has really resonated with so many people here who are so grateful for your sharing, obviously, like say, your life and experiences and explaining it all so well. So thank you for that. And it's again been a great way to end the day. Thank you. And thanks to everybody else who's been here with us today. If some of you have been here since this morning and been powering through, thank you so much for that. And obviously, as I've said previously, if anyone has any extra questions for our speakers, then feel free to drop them in our Facebook group or email us. I'll just pass over to Jo for a final comment for this session.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen. Absolutely amazing. As Shelley has just shared, so many comments in the chat, resonating so much. It's so important, like I said at the beginning, that as coaches, we start with ourselves and then we build that inclusiveness around us with how can we support you, bringing our curiosity, honoring our clients' experiences and helping them to explore and understand their needs and help them to get those needs met. And we have an important role to play within that. So Gwen, you did an amazing job, and I hope you have a great day tomorrow for 4th of July, important day. for all Americans. Thank you everybody for being with us today. We hope that you're able to join us tomorrow and have a lovely evening. Thank you.